So thank you everyone for joining us. This is International Career Mentor webinar. We're featuring my former professor, Olivier Bercault. Thank you so much for making time to speak with us, Professor.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Yes, so this is a series of webinars that we've been doing. It's sort of an adaptation to this, COVID crisis. We usually have two events, two large events that call International Career Mentor Night, and so we'll usually invite people, professionals who are, of course, in the field of international careers, to come and meet with students, and we'll do sort of like for about 2.5 hours, almost 3, well, 2.5 hours, and then a half hour of just meet and greet. But what we'll do is usually that in-person program consists of sort of like a speed mentoring program, right? So students would have like about 20 minutes to ask questions, about 10 minutes actually to ask questions to mentors, and what they'll do is like, there's mentors in different, we'll have about 10, 12 tables, 1 or 2 mentors per table, and students usually go around and, ask questions. But so we're doing it a bit differently because, of course, we can't meet in person, but just to tell you a little bit more about the education program, World Affairs, what we do is we are dedicated to engaging students in conversations about international affairs, and then also engaging students in solutions-based projects, right? So it's not only about having the discussions, but then how can what can we do to contribute to bringing about solutions or ideas about solutions, right? And and of course, one of those really important things is learning about people who have experience, extensive experience. So it's why I thought it would be a great idea to have you, Professor. It's a great pleasure that you made the time. Professor Bercault is an adjunct professor at University of San Francisco. He specializes in armed conflicts, refugee issues, and international criminal prosecutions. Has an extensive career working in different areas of conflict with Human Rights Watch. He conducted research missions in Eastern Chad, Darfur, Central Africa Republic, Algeria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Lanka, among others. Let me see. There's an extensive biography, but I don't want to chop it up. So I'll let you actually, take us through your journey about how, what inspired you, or what took you, what were sort of, what was your experience that took you through, one day thinking, hey, I want to actually join these missions and do research in these conflict areas, or, serve in different or boards of United Nations, that you were part of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, right? So if you can take us to your journey, you can take us as back as you want, so yes, the floor is yours, Professor.
All right, thank you very much. The thing is, I was always interested in political affairs, international matters, and I always traveled. Even at a young age, I was traveling by myself, so I was always curious to see the world, but politics was driving me. And then I went to law school, first in my native France, and then later on I studied at Columbia Law School in the United States, in New York. But initially I was an attorney in France, and I was working with refugees. Very young, I was a young attorney. I was like in France it's different. I passed the bar, I was 22.
Oh,
So
wow.
at a young age I worked with attorneys assisting refugees and asylum seekers. So I was exposed at a young age to like different types of refugee population from a lot of countries in the world. They were on the street, and they came to France to ask for asylum. And be protected by the French government. Of course, they were denied asylum, so we have to litigate. We're appealing the decisions. I was, at a young age, I was litigating a lot. I was sometimes 5-7 cases a week, a day, sorry. So, so I met a lot of refugees and with different stories from different places in the world. So it helped me to shape my vision of the world and my commitment. And at the time was just we try to protect these people from being expelled and sent back to where they could face persecution or torture. So it was pretty intense, different type of being an attorney. And so really it opened my mind to world problems and flows of refugees, migrations. It was really interesting. And then protection. You have to protect these people while they're looking for asylum, and you can't take these cases very lightly because you have the life of these people in your hands. And so that's it really changed my way of working professionally. You have to be very, very vigilant, working hard, and compassionate at the same time, because these people went through a lot. And at some point I left France. I was living in Russia, and when the USSR collapsed, and I worked for the High Commissioner for Refugees. The United Nations just opened an office there, and they were dealing with refugees for the first time. Russia was seeing refugees coming on its territory. It was so weird for Russians. They were not exposed to that in the past. So we have to develop protection. The same type of work, but much more like on a broader scale, a massive influx of refugees coming from Afghanistan. At the time in 92, 93, 94, there were like more than 80,000 Afghan refugees in Moscow alone, and without protection, without assistance. So I was already sensitive to this problem. So it helped me to develop a program to be able to deal with these refugees and show the Russian authorities how to work with refugees. And because they didn't know at the time. And they were quite open-minded at the early years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was interesting. I like the situation of being professionally involved with something new. My expertise was in a total different environment. So it was like Russia at the time of a huge transition. It was interesting to see like a new Russia emerging, and they were ratifying international conventions. So they have to apply these conventions. They have no idea how to do that. So you have to deal with a lot of people at the ministry level, foreign affairs. At the same time, you have to deal with refugees at the local level. Police harassment, for example. It was quite an interesting situation. So that's part of my experience. And then at some point, I moved to the United States. I went back to law school. So I studied law in the United States, which was interesting because I had it's a different system of law. So I have degrees in both systems, like the common law in the United States and the kind of a continental civil law type in Western Europe, which was a huge asset for my career because I understand how attorneys and lawyers deal with different, it's a different mindset. And not only for lawyers, it's kind of politically, it changed the picture. So I was very fortunate to be educated in both systems. And at some point I started to work for Human Rights Watch, and I had a long run with Human Rights Watch. And there were two things I was doing with Human Rights Watch. I was working, we studied a huge criminal case, a groundbreaking case. We tried to prosecute the former president, head of state of Chad, and we tried to bring this guy to court. He was in exile in a third country in Senegal, and it took us 17 years. I worked 17 years on the case, and to finally having prosecuted and convicted. So that's one part of my job, was to work on this case and do a lot of things. I can go back to that later if you want. I spent a lot of time in Chad, in Africa, and traveling a lot. There was like research and advocacy work. And then the bulk of my work was in the emergency system. So we decided to, at Human Rights Watch, we created a unit to be able to deploy researchers in war zones, conflict areas, and to document human rights violations, war crimes, crimes against humanity, a bit like live reporters, but very specialized. We wanted to alert the world of a degrading situation. That's why we call this team an emergencies department. It's nothing to do with humanitarian work. We're not bringing doctors or water or food. We just send researchers and to shed light on a terrible situation, to have an immediate impact. And we really started this in Kosovo, and then in Iraq in 2003, and then Darfur. Really the first big emergencies operations. And it worked. But then once you have the information, you bring the information back to policymakers, governments, United Nations, European Union, and say, okay, here is what's going on there. Now you have to move, you have to act. And our work sometimes triggers the creation and implementation of a peacekeeping mission, of the UN peacekeeping mission, or intervention of a government. That's exactly what we had in mind. So we have to stop this, which is a different type of work of a classic human rights researcher. A human rights researcher, like working on the freedom of press in Zimbabwe. He goes to Zimbabwe 3 times. He has 6 months to produce a report. This emergencies team in conflict areas, we just go there. We try to publish something in a week or 2 weeks or 1 month's time. We just shrink the time production just to have enough information to have an impact. But it's a lot of stress. You have to research and get facts very, very straight and fast. So I did that. And at some point I took a leave of absence from Human Rights Watch, and I was hired by the United Nations. And I went to, I was the deputy head of the Human Rights Office of the United Nations mission in Iraq. So I was based in the Green Zone in Baghdad, and in 2008 and 9. So it was a different type of work. This time I was aiding a team of 25 UN officials, and we tried to document the human rights situation because we wanted to have a clear picture of what was going on, and nobody could work there at the time. NGOs it was too dangerous for NGOs to work in Iraq at this time. But at the same time, we have like monitoring, we have the capacity building possibilities, with a lot of funds to train officials and NGOs in Iraq to deal with refugee issues, to update their knowledge of international law, because they just opened up and changed the criminal law system, things like that. So that was part of my job too. Research, monitoring, and capacity building. And then at some point, my life changed. As you know, I had a terrible motorcycle accident, so I could not do the same type of job. So I was hired by USF to teach. So I like teaching. It's just like now I'm training next generations of activists. It's about transmission. So it's in a nutshell. The thing is why I had an international career, because I really loved traveling. I was interested in knowing different cultures and international politics. So I was fortunate enough to be able to do this type of job. But really, it was in me before anything else. When I was young at 20, when I was in law school, people told me that when you're gonna become a lawyer and you're gonna deal with divorce all your life. And I say, I'm not sure about that. And then I ended up working on mass graves in Darfur, or dealing with ministers in Iraq, which police are represented at the house, at the parliament in Iraq. So you never know, but it's really in each of us. If you want to have an international career, it's up to you, and then you find your way. It's not going to come from the sky. It's just like it's really in ourselves, and we find a way to. What's important is just to do exactly what you want to do. It's to be pleased by what you do and be enjoying the type of work. So I know I could not be stuck in a law firm and being brief all my life. I knew I was not bound for that.
Yeah, yeah.
The reason why I ended up doing this international type of work. So it's in a nutshell what I have to say.
Yeah.
There is a lot, you know. We can,
Yes. So, was there at one point, or how early do you remember thinking, I want to be involved in what's happening out there? Just rather than what I mean out there is in the larger world, rather than just what's happening in your immediate town, your immediate country. Do you remember, or do you remember sort of what sparked that in you?
I think two things. First is that I really love traveling, and I was international. I'm interested in international perspective of the world. And then the fact that at a young age, as a young attorney, I worked with refugees, and these people were coming from all over the world with different cultures, horrendous stories to tell, and that's the reason why they wanted to get protection. And so I was really exposed to this different type of people from a diversity of countries, and it's really I was even more eager to travel. And okay, they are there in France, but I want to go where they come from, because I want to understand what's going on, what happened. That's really, I guess, after a few years working with refugees in France and listen to all these stories, I guess I wanted to go where it started, the problem started. And I already had traveled a lot before that, but on kind of a, on the leisure side of traveling, not professionally. And then suddenly I started to travel professionally, and I never stopped since.
I'm also interested in understanding how, because at one point you studied, you went to law school, and you became a lawyer at 22, I think you mentioned. But then at a later time is when you came back and studied international law?
No, when I was in the US, because it was difficult to reach the same type of same level of work, because I didn't have any US degree, a US law. I went back to law school in the US, then I got a US law degree. And I was not really studying international. It was more like US law to understand the mindset here. If I wanted to stay in the United States, so it was better for me to understand how the legal system worked here. Not because I didn't want to practice law in the US, but as a base to be able to travel internationally and just to understand the mindset. I learned a lot, like on US, just the class on constitutional law. I learned a lot about U.S. history and politics, actually. So it was really interesting. I learned a lot about the country, so it helped me just to stay in the U.S. and being able to have a kind of a different perspective of international affairs.
And how was it that you knew that you wanted to work with and being involved in such I would say in cases of of such, I would say very heavy as far as like not only psychological, right, for people that experience and people to know what happened in different conflict areas, but also heavy, I would say, for a person that does work in that area, right? I could also imagine that, it's not an easy thing to take in, right? Even to, convince yourself that, I'm going to go to this place, or I'm going to be, investigating, what happened here. Was there a point in your life that you realized that you wanted to, involve yourself, be in the, in the epicenter of conflicts, or how did that came about?
While working at Human Rights Watch, I was working on this international criminal case, and then we had the war in Iraq, And so they asked me if I could join this team, because I already went to Africa a lot, and I was working in Chad a lot on the case. And Chad is a difficult country, and you need some, special training in a way to work. It's a different environment, and I was very okay with that. I loved it. So I was back and forth between New York and Chad a lot. And when the war started in Iraq, they asked me to join they were sending researchers to Iraq right during the invasion. So it was risky, and the working conditions were difficult. And things, I had worked in Chad a lot. I was staying in Chad for 5 months sometime in a row. I was trained to this what we call hostile environment conditions. So, and I said, okay. And then at some point, then all the missions follow up, because then the war in Darfur started. And since I knew Chad, and I was spending a lot of time in Chad, and Darfur is just eastern border of Chad and Sudan. Yeah. I said, you go there and have a look at what's going on. So I was able to go to eastern Chad and then enter Sudan illegally, and because we had no visa, we could not get a visa to Sudan. So we were able to cross over with the insurgents and then document and take photos and make films. And because I knew Chad, and they asked me to cover this conflict, and then other conflicts followed. And so then at the time was Algeria, Afghanistan, Iraq again, and there were Sri Lanka was in the middle of the war, and I knew Sri Lanka well because of my previous work with Sri Lankan refugees. So I have kind of a drive for that. I really liked it, and then I have the expertise, and then you have an you got experience. You know how to work in an hostile environment, and that's the work of sometimes you have like like Sri Lanka, which is a perfect example at Human Rights Watch. There are no fund for researcher for Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was quiet for a few years, and then the war started again, ignited again, and they said, okay, we have to send people there. But there are no researcher in Sri Lanka, so they asked the emergency, can you send someone there? I'm not an expert in Sri Lanka. I knew the situation because of my previous work, but I'm not the researcher in Sri Lanka. So you do a lot of homework, but you know how to work in this hostile environment. That's the reason why you go there. And then you do your homework before. You learn a lot about the situation and the years before and why we had reached this point. And then you can do then you have a network on the ground. You meet NGOs, activists, victims, and then Sri Lanka was difficult because the army was on our back all the time. We have to be extremely careful. But we're trained for that, so. And but you really over the years. You developed a kind of a very strong experience. And when interviewing people, kind of a sixth sense in interviewing people too. You have to see, interview victims and witnesses. So I think I conducted thousands of interviews in my life. So I know how to do that by experience. You can't learn that yet in school.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things, experience, and sort of thinking about students that are watching this. A lot of students have, I mean, of course, like I wasn't a student long ago, but you sort of have an idea of what you want to do. You think you have a plan, right? But but I would say that experience is what leads you to I think it does a lot of what, it's a great percentage of what leads you to a particular place, right? And I think, the reason is because you're learning about yourself, and you're learning about, where you can best apply or contribute your skills, your passion. And so I think this is one of the things that, I always emphasize with students, right? It's just, let your experience drive you. Of course, like, it's okay to have an idea. It's really good to have an idea of what you want to do. And you should follow your passion. But at the same time, it's we're all sort of work in progress, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's a combination of passion, but then expertise, experience. because then the more you gain experience, the better you are, and then you have the expertise, kind of academic background, and you have to work on it. And
Right.
then passion issue. I like, for what I was doing is just sometimes you jump from one car to a small plane, you're at the border and chat, and you have to wait a few days just to cross over a river, then have to dry, and then you sleep with your sleeping bag for 2 days in the dirt, and then you go in so it's and I discovered myself as I knew that I liked it and I was okay with that, so you can take a shower for like 3 weeks and you have to wash with water and things like that. Sometimes the missions are a bit extreme. We have like some mission in Central African Republic, and I was captured by insurgents, so I knew sometimes it's a bit tense, but I was okay with that, So and I can switch back to normal life as soon as I was touching base in New York. I was back to normal life. I was very fortunate to be able to switch back on and out, on and off. But of course, it comes with experience too. Then, and as you say, passion. I really liked what I was doing. So, I think the life is to get up in the morning and you don't like what you work. I think that the things that can happen to you. So.
Yes, exactly. It's we always have to be attentive to those discomforts, right? Whenever we enter a certain position, or even school, if you're in a program that you just feel like it's not a good fit for you, or it's any environment that we're part of. I think it's really important to pay attention to those discomforts. They're telling us something about ourselves.
But if you are in discomfort, you're not happy, you're not performing well.
Yes.
Which is really important if you want to be efficient in your work. And another thing very important is when you meet people. Sometimes just like my life changed because I met some people, and they say, okay, I'd like to work with you. So, and they say, okay, let's try it. And sometimes just like a meeting, an encounter that you are not expecting, that changes everything.
So for the audience listening, please submit your questions through the Q&A, or if you want to raise your hand and ask questions directly to Professor Bercault. Now it's the time. Professor, meanwhile, while we wait for folks to submit their questions, can you take us through your experience in law school? How was law school for you?
Well, the first time I was very young, so just when you go to law school in the French university system, you go to law school, you're 18 years old, so I was pretty young. I liked it very much. I learned a lot about different subject matters and courses. So I got good grades, so I did like 5 years, it's a different system than in the US, But then I passed the bar, and easily actually when I was 22. So it was good. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot of things. And the second time when I was in the US at Columbia Law School in New York, it was very challenging, much more difficult than law school in Paris. Different level, much more challenging, and but again, I learned a lot about the United States, actually, about the country. So, when I became a U.S. citizen, it was good because I could answer all the questions. I studied at the U.S. law school, and it was really interesting, actually. What I liked the second time was just like I was already a lawyer, but then I can really get deep into the social and political fabrics of the United States. It was really a great experience.
All right, thank you. So let me see, there's a few questions. Gonna go through this real quick. Let's see, Lisa Moresco says, please comment on the effectiveness of the UN, and what do you think about the current UN efforts at global ceasefire Huh.
Interesting.
Thank you. So let me see. Global ceasefire.
I mean, yeah, I can answer that if you want. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the United Nations, so it's a huge organization. And it can be improved by large. You know, it's just like it's not working well, I have to say, and it's like a huge bureaucracy. But I think the world is better off with the United Nations than without, clearly, because it helps countries to talk to each other and to sit and be able to interact and to trade and exchange views and because I cannot imagine the United States, the world without the United Nations. There won't be any forum to talk. You know, if there is a crisis somewhere, and at least you can sit and talk. But at the same time, there is a lot of limits and limitations. It's not working well. Look at Syria. We talk about ceasefire in Syria because the Security Council is a consequence of the Second World War, and it doesn't represent the world of today, of 2020. And when you have like 5 permanent Security Council members.
Right.
United States, Russia, China, England, and France. There is no African states. India they have the say, you know, and the veto power is huge. Look in Syria, China and Russia were blocking any possibility of finding a solution. Like a resolution is always blocked, you know. So that's the limitations of the United Nations system, and especially the Security Council. The Security Council, it's very powerful to when they want to solve a crisis, and if there is a political will, it could be an amazing tool to stop crisis and to build a ceasefire. But it's not working it's dysfunctional. It could really be improved big time, you know. But there is ongoing efforts within the UN system to update the system, to update the organization, and to improve it. But it's difficult because it's political. It's not an independent entity. The United Nations is the representation of world state. So you have to deal with that. Yeah. But one more time, I think that a world without the UN system will be worse than with it, definitely.
A follow-up question is, do you think it's necessary to go to law school in order to be successful and make a living in the field of international affairs and human rights?
It's not necessary, but it helps because I don't agree with that. But that's a trend especially in the human rights field. Human rights milieu that a lot of lawyers are working in this field. Human rights. So that's a reality. Yeah, it helps, but unfortunately, it should not be the case. At Human Rights Watch, we understood that. At some point, we started to hire journalists, reporters, geographers, historians, just to widen the experience. There were too many lawyers in the organization, which is it's good because it's a very specific way of approaching problems and seeing things. Perspective is very specific when you're a lawyer, but we need more experience than that. And so I think it's not a necessity, but unfortunately it helps. Yes, to go to law school if you want to join this human rights field.
Okay, so let's see. We have a question from the chat. Says, I'm a former photojournalist who covered war crimes and disaster in Kosovo, Macedonia, Iraq, Thailand, and Turkey. I was not able to earn a living doing this. Later, I created a tiny prototype program and worked with Syrian refugee children, and trying to offer psychosocial tools My current plan is to get an MSW in Berlin starting this year. But my question is there a way to use all this experience to work in the field and to earn a living? It seems that it seems like photojournalism, even specialized in war, crimes, and genocide, isn't a useful resume. So, do you have any? Can you share your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I have a lot of good friends, photojournalists, actually, I worked with, because we were at Human Rights Watch had a deal with Magnum. And so I was able to go out with like a generation of amazing war photographers, like my friend Tim Etherington, who was killed in Syria, in Libya. He was a very good friend of mine, like Kadir van Luizen or Stanley Green. All these amazing war photographers were good friends of mine, and I know it is difficult to make a living. Those who are working for very respectful agencies, world press agencies, it was okay. They were paid, could go on mission, and at Human Rights Watch, for example, we were fairly paid. I could make a living in New York. Of course, if I had worked as an attorney in a corporate law firm, I would have much more money. But the thing, working for Human Rights Watch, we have a decent salary, so it was okay. And the key in this milieu, we have to raise funds. Like the Hissène Habré case, for example, we worked on for 17 years. We raised our own funds, and with the money we could pay ourselves. But then that's the key. The primary money is key, and it's great when in your team you have a good fundraiser. It could change the picture, and then you have no problem to be able to make a living and then produce an interesting work. But I know it's very difficult, and I'm working on a project, a new project we started a few years back, and we try to raise funds. It's difficult actually, really. So sometimes it's really a lot of. I did a lot of pro bono work, and because there is work I had to do, but I could not find funds for that. But I performed the work anyway. So you be ready for that, clearly.
Yeah. And
that's why a lot of people join the UN. That's another thing, that when you work for the United Nations, you are really well paid. And that's why at some point, after 25 or 20 years working for NGOs, a lot of people, they end up with this expertise. They bring this expertise to the UN because at some point it makes a difference. They are better paycheck at the end of the month. So that's another reason why people join the UN, actually, especially in developed countries, because then you can make a living that you can't otherwise. And that's another thing to keep in mind when we talk about the United Nations.
What would you say to folks that want to be involved in this type of work, but they may be already older, and may have family responsibilities and can't travel much. What are some of your thoughts?
That's a good question. That's something I thought of, actually. Yeah, it's very. I mean, I find it very difficult to have a family and do this type of work at the same time. And frankly, I had no family when I was doing that. I could not have personally. I could not have done both at the same time. It was just like I was traveling 8 months out of 12, 9 months, and in difficult situations. So you're never here, never present. At the same time, your loved ones are always stressed out because you don't know where these researchers or war photographers, war reporters are, and they are in difficult situations, in difficult, extreme conditions and dangerous conditions. So it's a weight on the families back in the home place, and so that's something you have to know. And if you really want to have a family, it's something you have to balance. And I've friends that were really good at that. But I remember Chris Andros had a wife and 2 young children, and he was killed in in Libya, and he was a war photographer for the New York Times. He was killed with my friend Tim. Tim had no family, so I mean, he has his parents, his sister, but Andros had his own family, so it was terrible for his wife and his kids, you know. So, so there is, and even if you're not working in conflict areas, just like working abroad and in these difficult conditions, it takes a toll, you know. So it's difficult. Then you have this also is emotional weight in you, and then you don't want to share it with your family, you know. So it's a trade-off, you know. You really have to be very well grounded and a balanced life, actually.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I joined the Masters in International Affairs program at USF because I've interested in just getting involved in international affairs. So I thought that I would go to New York, Washington, maybe somewhere in Europe or somewhere in Latin America. But I have a family, so I had to balance those things out too as well. So I'm involved in some of course, some way. I work for World Affairs, and so through SF, through my work here at World Affairs, I'm able to have some, I'm still involved in international affairs, but of course not as how I imagine it. So yeah, it definitely is a trade-off. It's definitely a trade-off. So yeah, something to keep in mind. That's a really good question. Let me see. Are there any organizations that you would recommend pursuing in the Bay Area for a career in international affairs? If you were a student today in the Bay Area, how would you go about starting your career?
I mean, you have like so many good organizations. It depends, and some are really specialized, like international relief, working with refugees, or you have Human Rights Watch or this kind of organizations. There is like the ICTJ in New York. They work on transitional justice, and they are the experts on truth commissions. And so it's a small niche, but they are so good, and expertise are. It's a place to go. There are so many organizations like they're big international. I mean, you have local organizations, very doing a very efficient work too. The best way to start, because the thing is they're always asking for experience. I think the best way is to go out, even if you are not paid or really paid, you're working for a tiny organization somewhere deep in Africa or in Asia, and okay, let's go and start something. Start having an experience. The most difficult part is to build up an experience. It's just like having credit, you don't get any credit card when you're young in life, so then you have to start with one, and then you build up your credit, and the same, you build up your experience, so you're ready to start and go anywhere. But like for Human Rights, my first assignment was just to go deep undercover in Chad for 5 months, and I was not really well paid. We were starting this project, we don't have much fund, and I said, okay, let's do it. So I just started. I just went to Chad, and I was working hard, and it was really really good, very interesting. We were pretty efficient. But then, if I had thought like a little bit more coldly, I would say no, it's insane. But then I just follow my passion. I said, okay, let's do it. So the most important is to start to build up an experience.
And I would say take some calculated risks. Yeah,
absolutely. But you always take risk in line of work, but not unnecessary.
Right.
But that's why when you're trained and you get experience, and then you know what you are doing.
So there's a question. I think you might have answered this already. What was the main reason that Olivier decided to go to law school in New York, as he was already a lawyer in France?
As I said, I was living in the US, and I could not reach the same level of work. I needed to have an American degree. And then I met a very famous attorney, was working for the Soros Foundation. He was in charge of the refugee program. And this guy was killed in Iraq. He had a meeting with the head of the UN office in 2003 when the famous bombing of the Iraqi UN office, the UN office in Baghdad in 2003, and he was just there at that moment, and he was killed. And this guy at the time advised me, you should maybe go back to law school. And I said, okay, why not? So I applied to many law school, and because I was already an attorney, and I was a fellow at the Human Rights Institute at Columbia Law School.
So your question about what kind of internships would you suggest for someone who is trying to get a job for the United Nations?
You can like in this case, an international organization. It depends on the field, but if you like interning for Doctor Without Borders without being a medical doctor, if you can work for the administration of the organization, they always need people. Even if you're not an expert like a lawyer or a photographer or a medical doctor, just to go to a mission and able to run the mission, and that's gold. And there is a non-for-profit administration master at USF, and is run by the Dr. Taventi. It's a great master, and they teach students to run an NGO and to create an NGO. And it's very interesting. So even if you don't have this specific expertise, just to know how to run a business, then you can run an NGO, and then it's you're ready to go to a place a bit far and help run the organization in the field. Yes, it's a good way to start. And then you can join the UN or be a junior in the UN. You have to take exams, and then you can start at the junior level in the UN without experience. When I joined the UN, I was hired at the top professional level because I was already had experience, and so I entered at the P5, and I was a D1 very, very fast. But then at the junior level, yes, you have to take exams, and it's possible too.
Is it PP5 and D1? Those are different levels?
Yeah. Like P are the professionals from P1, P2, and P5 is the top, and then you become a diplomat, D1, D2, and then it's just top of the chart.
What has been the most, I would say, life-changing experience that you've ever had in your career?
I'm working with when I was working in Chad on this, when we started this international criminal case, we had to build up the case, and we did a lot of research, and I started to, I stayed in Chad for 5 months undercover and living with Chadians. And at the time, there was the Darfur crisis didn't start, and there is no oil extraction project that came afterward in Chad. There is no Europeans or American. There was just only Chadians living in Germany. So I was really like living with Chadians, and I was working with the victims of the dictatorship that fell 10 years earlier. So I was like really deeply involved in the African culture and Chad culture, and working with people who have been traumatized for so long and were unable to talk about it because the henchmen of the dictator were still around in position of power. So I think I helped these people. We did the research where we documented what happened. We found the document, the archive of the political police. In doing that, it helped them to start a new life. It was a healing process, and I lived that with these people through the process. And it was just something really opened my mind on a lot of issues, and it really changed my mind because I see these people being like traumatized and scared, suddenly being empowered and changing and becoming becoming what they were before the dictatorship again, just like confident and ready to fight. And it was a great life-changing experience. When I had this accident and I was in the hospital for a long time, I didn't complain. I was thinking of these victims of the dictatorship in Chad. It was just like a great source of inspiration. So these people, they were tortured, they were in jail for years, and they survived, and then they didn't want vengeance. They just they were fighting for justice. And it was a great source of inspiration.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. What has been, well, what is, right now you're a professor at University of San Francisco. What is your favorite part of that position?
Of interacting with the students, and you see that I can bring something to them. I'm just transmitting, like, and what they like at USF, because I have the academic hat. I'm an attorney, and I went to law school, and then I published a lot, but they like my field experience. And it's a combination, because I'm not a teacher. I never study to become a teacher, so I really have to really pure experience. Because my first class, I was pretty scared, actually. And, because I never taught in my life, so then after, like, now it's like six years, I really liked it. I like to just bring something and learn something to teach something to the students, and I'm learning a lot from the students as well. It's back and forth. It was quite surprising. And so I really like it. And it's much more work than I thought initially.
Yeah, I think that's
great. It's really I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I think that was our the greatest impression that we'd had as as students in your class was like your level of experience, because everything that you talked about was not just conceptual. It was, hey, like, I was on the ground and this is what happened. And then, in combination with with the concepts, I think that's what really like made your class, I think, be one of the most, I would say, interesting, but then also as far as like learning, and almost felt like, you even showed us videos about, that you recordings of, when you were doing research. And so I think your stories in combination with all that brought it alive, brought the content alive in a way that I never experienced. So yeah, I can vouch for that. That's very,
it's good. It's exactly what I have in mind. It's a combination. Yeah. Then it's more lively, and then you can absorb the concept easily.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So we have, let me see, I think we have time for about a couple of questions. Says, I'm interested to know what are your thoughts about the role of the ICC in Africa? In your opinion, was it an effective tool? What are your suggestions for improvement?
It's a good question, because I was always, ICC is accused of being biased and targeting only African criminals and African states, which is unfair, because the ICC has only jurisdiction over states that have ratified the Rome Treaty creating the ICC. It's a treaty body. It's not like ICC has jurisdiction over these countries only if these countries have ratified. So, and what is beautiful, that initially African countries have signed and ratified the ICC treaty massively, and like, for example, Syria has not ratified, or and Russia or China. So you're not going to investigate in these countries, because you need a referral from the Security Council, but not in Africa. So, and there is like a lot of crimes committed in Africa. So that's why the ICC focuses on Africa. It's more like for a technical reason, not for bias. And victims of crimes in Africa were just like really like happy that, because they can't bring their case to their domestic courts. They are not heard. It's too dangerous. So ICC can step in. But the thing is, it's not efficient because the United States is not part of it, and for a lot of internal political reasons. The day we have like an international coalition in different perspective, more like a democratic perspective, and that we have like a majority of the Senate in the US to ratify the ICC treaty, and then the United States becomes a part of the ICC, it will change the court forever. Then we will be at full speed. So we really need to have this change of mind in the United States, I think.
Right. So we're reaching a little bit close to, the near the end of the program. But what would you say to students? What would be what will be your sort of your final recommendations to students that are thinking about, a career in international affairs? Know there's different fields, right? But what could be something that, maybe a lesson that, a lesson learned, right, for you, and maybe something that you can share with students.
But I think first, just like share, follow your passion, and
Mm-hmm.
don't think too much in terms of career or have an agenda. It's just follow your passion, and if you like to travel, and, just go for it, and then it will open the way. So when we say that when there is a will, there is always a way, and it's if you have the will and the passion to go internationally, you're gonna find a way to be successful, and that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I even didn't think much, I just I followed my
Yeah.
passion. It was just like question of
Yeah.
life or death, So I want to travel.
Yeah.
I want to work internationally. It happened.
Yeah.
I really never thought about it. I just follow my own path.
Right. Yeah, and I would say also, I mean, one of the things that you highlighted is just, I mean, everything, it's just about experience, because that, once again, as I mentioned before, it tells you something about yourself. So one of the things that I've been learning, in my post USF, post USF, it's been, thinking about, my job as sort of like, well, I have my own personal projects, right? So I paint, and then also I make music. And so I think about those things as like, I have an idea, and then I have to plan about how am I going to bring those things alive, right? Or sometimes I actually don't plan. I just, I just do it. But anyway, you have to think about yourself, involving. One thing that I've learned is like, I think about myself like, how am I involving myself in a project that I'm going to enjoy, like the process, like I'm genuinely going to wake up and, really, really feel energized to do something. And I think a job is in the same way, right? So whether you're working for NGO, government, or in a private business, you are involved, you're in an idea that people are sort of working together to bring alive. And so, the question is like, how, are you invested in that project? Are you invested in the process? And so, and the only way to find out is to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we reached, the end of the program, but I really want to thank you for your time. I know it's late out there in France, so thank you for making the time to, to speak with us and talk to students. I hope when you come back to the West Coast, we're able to link up under more normal circumstances. Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you very much. It was great. No, thanks.
Thank you so much. And just so I just want to invite folks to join our Instagram page at World Affairs ED. So there we have updates on other webinars coming up. We have a webinar tomorrow with it's going to be a discussion between our CEO Philip Yun and Dakota Gruner, who is a executive director at a global private public organization. So that's going to be very interesting. But thank you all. Thank you, Professor Bercault.
Be in touch.
Good night.